Good Wednesday morning and happy Epiphany. What is Epiphany? You might be familiar and maybe not, but it is the observance within many faith traditions of the coming of the wise men to visit the child Jesus. 2 weeks after Christmas? Why are we observing it so late, you might be asking? And that would be a good question. You see, a lot of us have nativity scenes that we put on display at Christmas time. And what do those nativity scenes consist of? You have Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus. You have the shepherds and some sheep typically laying around, maybe cattle. And then you have on the other side the three wise men bearing gifts for the baby Jesus. And there might be angels that are showing up around the scene as well. It's a beautiful scene of the Christmas story. But unfortunately, that scene is not very accurate according to scriptures. There is no one story in the Bible that talks about all of these characters, all these participants being on the scene at the same time. In fact, there isn't even one story that talks about all of these characters being involved in the story, period. In the book of Luke, we hear about the angels showing up to shepherds out in the fields at night, and the shepherds go and visit the baby Jesus and the Holy Family, and then they take back off for their fields. No mention whatsoever of wise men. No mention at all of the little drummer boy. And then you go to the book of Matthew and you hear about Epiphany. You hear about the coming of the wise men to Mary and young Jesus. But there is nothing said about angels at the scene. There is nothing said about shepherds or sheep, and again, no little drummer boy. So when we look at Matthew, we find that here come these wise men from the east. And when we recognize that these wise men were coming from the far east, they were not going to get to Bethlehem overnight. In fact, it is understood that Jesus would have been around 2 years old by the time that the wise men appeared, bearing their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So a couple of points about that. We sometimes sing a hymn called We Three Kings. And sometimes in these nativity scenes, the Magi, the wise men, are depicted with crowns on their heads. But they are not kings. They are not rulers of any nations. They are magi, wise men. And actually, they are astrologers. They have been educated to pay attention to the skies, to recognize the patterns of the stars and the planets, though they wouldn't have known quite all of the details that we know today. And so it was in their following of a star that they come to Mary and to the child Jesus. And so that is one aspect of the story that's important to know, that Jesus was probably about 2 years old when they show up. And of course, they go to the king Herod in Jerusalem to find out where exactly this child is. And Herod is not aware of it, but he feels threatened for his power, for his role, and he wants nothing to do with a Messiah, a Savior, who is going to potentially replace him. So he sends the wise men to Bethlehem and then eventually asks for all male children under the age of 2 to be killed in order to prevent this potential Messiah from taking his place in power. So, Epiphany. Today is the day that we acknowledge the coming of the wise men, and hopefully you learned a little something new there in regards to the timing of the story and how the stories differ. So if you're interested, take a look at Matthew chapter 1 and 2 and compare that to Luke's story of the birth of Jesus. And you'll recognize how those two stories have often been melded into one as we celebrate Christmas. You have a great Wednesday and a great Epiphany. And if you are not connected to a congregation, I invite you to go ahead and look up Ascension Lutheran Church in Paradise Valley, Arizona. Look up our website, and we have live streaming of our worship services at 10 o'clock Arizona time. And this weekend, we will be talking about the baptism of Jesus, and my sermon title will be Unbridled. Unbridled. You have a great day. God bless you. Goodbye.